Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Crown, and today I'm going to read you some very interesting stories that I hope that you're gonna love. And now, without further ado, let's go!
I've been living in my house for some years now, and overall it's been pretty peaceful. The neighborhood is quiet, mostly families with kids, and everyone keeps to themselves. My house sits on a corner lot with a shared driveway that connects to my neighbor's property. It's one of those old arrangements where both houses use the same concrete strip to get to our respective garages. Usually this works fine since we both know the drill, don't block each other in. My neighbor is this middle-aged guy who works from home doing some kind of consulting. He's not unfriendly, but he's definitely one of those people who thinks his time is more valuable than everyone else's. You know the type? Always in a hurry, always has somewhere important to be, always has some project going on that requires contractors or delivery trucks. The whole mess started on a Tuesday morning when I was getting ready to meet my friend for lunch. We'd planned this for weeks because she was going to pick up her 4-year-old son from his first school visit afterward, and I wanted to hear all about how it went. The kid had been nervous about starting school, so this was a big deal for their family. I grabbed my keys and headed out to my car, only to find the entire driveway blocked by 2 work trucks. These weren't small pickups either, they were those massive contractor vehicles that take up enough space for 3 normal cars. I couldn't even see my garage door behind them. I walked over to where the workers were unloading equipment on my neighbor's side of the property. I asked them politely if they could move their trucks because I needed to get my car out. The first worker, a guy in his 30s wearing a hard hat, barely looked up from his toolbox. He told me they weren't going to be long, maybe 20 or 30 minutes at most. I explained that I had somewhere I needed to be right now and that it would just take them a minute to move the trucks. The second worker joined our conversation, wiping his hands on a rag. He said it would be a real pain to move everything again since they'd just unloaded all their stuff. He promised they'd be quick. I tried to stay calm. I told them I understood it was inconvenient, but this was a shared driveway and they couldn't just block me in without asking. The first worker dismissed me again, saying it was all good and they really wouldn't be long. That phrase stuck with me, the dismissive way he said it. Like my schedule didn't matter at all. I realized they had no intention of moving, so I pulled out my phone and called my friend. I explained that there was a change of plans and asked if she could pick me up instead because my driveway was completely blocked. My friend was understanding about it, but I was steaming mad. These guys had basically trapped me in my own home because moving their trucks was slightly inconvenient for them. The entitlement was unreal. We had a great lunch, and afterward we went to pick up her son from his school visit. The little guy was absolutely buzzing with excitement about his new classroom, the playground, and meeting his teacher. He chattered nonstop about the reading corner and how they got to paint pictures of their families. He told us excitedly about seeing the cafeteria and how they had chocolate milk every day. My friend asked if he liked his teacher, and he said she was really nice and had a fish tank with real fish in it. The kid was over the moon about everything he'd experienced. When we pulled up to my house 2 hours later, I saw the trucks were still there, exactly where they'd been when we left. 2 hours. So much for 20 or 30 minutes at most. My friend started to pull over to the curb to drop me off, but I had a better idea. I asked her to pull right up behind the work trucks in the driveway. She looked confused but did what I asked. She parked her car directly behind the work trucks, completely blocking them in. Then I had an even better idea and told her to turn the car off. She raised an eyebrow but switched off the engine. I turned around to face her son in the back seat and asked him to tell me again about his school visit. I said I wanted to hear every single detail. The kid's face lit up and he launched into the most detailed recap you've ever heard from a 4-year-old. He told us about every activity, every room, every kid he met, what they had for snack time, how the bathroom had special short sinks, and on and on. I made sure to ask lots of follow-up questions to keep him talking. It didn't take long before one of the workers noticed our car blocking them in. The same guy who dismissed me earlier came walking over, looking annoyed. He asked us to move our car because they needed to get out. I leaned over toward the driver's window with the biggest smile I could manage and told him it was all good and we wouldn't be long. His face went through several expressions when he realized I was throwing his exact words back at him. He stood there for a moment, clearly wanting to argue, but what could he say? Instead, he trudged back to his truck to wait. Meanwhile, the little boy was still going strong with his school stories, now describing in detail how they learned to line up properly and walk to different rooms. My friend was trying not to laugh when she got onto what I was doing. The boy told us about how the teacher said they could bring their favorite stuffed animal on Fridays, but it had to be small enough to fit in their cubbies. I asked him what stuffed animal he was planning to bring, keeping the conversation going. We sat there for a good 15 minutes, engine off, listening to every adorable detail of this kid's school experience. I could see the worker in the truck getting more and more agitated, checking his phone, looking at his watch, probably realizing he had other jobs to get to. Finally, the little guy started getting hungry and asking about snacks, so I figured it was time to wrap things up. I got out of the car and walked over to the truck. The worker rolled down his window, looking pretty sheepish. He apologized for what had happened earlier and admitted they should have moved the trucks when I first asked. I told him I appreciated the apology and suggested that next time he should remember that other people have places to be too. He agreed completely and promised it wouldn't happen again. The trucks were moved within 2 minutes, and I finally got into my own driveway. My friend was cracking up when she drove away. My neighbor came out later that evening to apologize too. Apparently the workers had told him what happened, and he was embarrassed about the whole thing. He promised to make sure any future contractors would park on the street instead of blocking the shared driveway. My wife and I take our kids to the community pool every weekend. It's a tradition we started years ago, pack some snacks, grab the sunscreen, and spend a few hours watching our 7-year-old son and 5-year-old daughter splash around in the shallow end. It's usually pretty peaceful, just families trying to beat the heat and have some fun. That Saturday started like any other. We got there around noon, claimed our usual spot near the kiddie pool, and my wife started setting up our chairs while I helped the kids get their floaties on. The pool wasn't too crowded yet, maybe a dozen families scattered around. That's when I noticed her. This woman was standing at the edge of the deep end with a little girl who couldn't have been more than 6 years old. The kid was in a one-piece swimsuit, no floaties, no nothing. She was gripping her mom's hand so tight her knuckles were white, and even from where I was sitting I could see she was terrified. The Karen was trying to coax the girl toward the water. At first, I thought maybe they were just working up to getting in slowly. You know how some kids are scared of water. But then I heard what she was saying. Karen was telling her daughter that the only way to learn swimming was to jump right in. She said that's how she learned when she was her daughter's age, and there was no other way to do it properly. The little girl was shaking her head, tears already starting to form in her eyes. She begged her mother, saying she was scared and asking if they could start in the shallow end instead. But Karen refused, saying the shallow end was only for babies. She told her daughter she was a big girl now and needed to learn the right way, not the easy way. My wife and I exchanged looks. This didn't feel right. Other parents were starting to notice too. An older couple sitting nearby were whispering to each other. The little girl was crying now, full-on sobbing. She pleaded with her mother, saying she didn't want to do it and that she was too scared. But Karen just kept pushing. She was positioning herself behind her daughter, hands on the kid's shoulders. She told her daughter to stop being such a baby and pointed out that other kids were watching. She asked if her daughter wanted everyone to think she was a crybaby. That's when I stood up. I walked over and politely suggested that maybe the little girl would be more comfortable starting in the shallow end since the deep end was pretty intimidating. I mentioned that it was quite deep over there. Karen spun around like I'd insulted her entire family tree. She told me to mind my own business and said this was her daughter, so she knew what was best for her. I tried to explain that most swim instructors recommend starting kids in shallow water, where they can touch the bottom. Karen asked if I was a swim instructor, and when I said no, she told me to shut up and worry about my own kids instead. By now, half the pool was watching this unfold. The little girl was hyperventilating, begging her mom to stop, She promised she would be brave tomorrow and asked if they could please just go home. An elderly man who'd been doing laps came over to the edge of the pool. He politely told Karen that the water was 8 feet deep and suggested that maybe the little one should start with some proper lessons first. Karen exploded at him too, yelling that everyone needed to mind their own damn business. She declared that her daughter was going to learn today, whether she liked it or not. That's when things went from bad to horrifying. Karen grabbed her daughter by the arms and just pushed. The little girl went flying into the deep end with a splash that seemed to echo through the entire pool area. For a split second, everything went quiet. Then the screaming started. The poor kid came up sputtering and panicking, her arms flailing when she tried to stay above water. She was drowning right in front of us, and Karen was standing there clapping and cheering. Karen kept shouting encouragement, telling her daughter she could see that she was doing great. She told her to just keep moving her arms like that when the kid was actually drowning instead of swimming. The kid went under again. I didn't even think. I dove in fully clothed, shoes and all. The water was deeper than I expected, and it took me a few strokes to reach her. When I got there, she was barely conscious, her little body limp from exhaustion and panic. I scooped her up and swam back to the shallow end quickly. My wife was already there with a towel, and I handed the little girl to her. The kid was coughing up water and shivering, even though it was 90 degrees outside. My wife wrapped the little girl in the towel and gently told her that she was okay now and that she was safe. Karen came storming over. She demanded that we give her back her daughter immediately, yelling that we had no right to interfere with her parenting. My wife held the little girl tighter and told Karen that she wasn't giving her back. Karen screamed that the child was hers and threatened to call the police on us. I told her that was a good idea and said we should definitely call them. I was already pulling out my phone. Karen's face went from red to pale real quick. She backtracked quickly, saying we should wait and that she was just teaching her daughter to swim. I pointed out that throwing a non-swimmer into 8 feet of water wasn't teaching. It was child endangerment. Other parents started gathering around us. The elderly man who tried to reason with Karen earlier was shaking his head. He told everyone that he'd been a lifeguard for 30 years and that what he'd just witnessed was the most irresponsible thing he'd ever seen. Karen insisted that we were all overreacting and that kids were tougher than we thought. The little girl was still clinging to my wife, who was gently rocking her back and forth. My wife softly asked the child what her name was. The little girl whispered that her name was Sarah. My wife told Sarah that she was very brave and that she didn't have to go back in the water until she was ready. The police showed up about 10 minutes later. By then, at least 6 different people had given statements about what they'd witnessed. Karen tried to play it off like it was all a misunderstanding, but the responding officer wasn't buying it. The officer told Karen that multiple witnesses had reported seeing her forcibly throw her daughter into the deep end of the pool despite the child's obvious distress. Karen protested that she was just teaching her daughter to swim and insisted that wasn't illegal. The officer told her that reckless endangerment of a child was definitely illegal. They ended up arresting Karen right there at the pool. Sarah went with Child Protective Services that day, and from what I heard, she ended up living with her grandmother. The whole thing shook me up more than I expected. I kept thinking about what would have happened if I hadn't been there, or if I'd hesitated for even a few more seconds. That little girl could have drowned, while her own mother cheered her on. My kids asked a lot of questions on the drive home. I tried to explain that sometimes adults make really bad choices, and that's why it's important for other adults to step in and help when they can. I ran into Sarah and her grandmother at the grocery store a few months later. Her grandmother thanked me for what I'd done, but honestly, I still don't think of myself as a hero. I just did what any decent person would do when they see a child in danger. It's scary to think how many people might have just watched and done nothing. My husband and I have been together for 2.5 years, and we had our son in January. Things have been mostly good between us, but what happened last night has me questioning everything. My husband has autism and attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, which can make communication tough sometimes. We live in Europe where The healthcare system works differently than in the US. Because of his conditions, he only works 50% of the time. The other half is covered by temporary health insurance, and every few months he has to reapply. It's stressful because we never know if he'll get approved again. Since his situation is so uncertain, we decided that instead of me taking a full year of maternity leave, he would take most of the parental leave days. That way, if his temporary insurance gets denied, he can keep his 50% work schedule and still get paid for his days off. This meant I had to go back to work part-time much earlier than planned. I work from home as a private teacher. I get to choose my own hours since most of my students live in different countries. I scheduled some lessons in the afternoon when my husband is home with our son, and some at night when my international students would be awake and my husband would still be home. I only have one evening student who I teach from 11 p.m. to 11:30 p.m. twice a week. We talked about this arrangement before I went back to work. The extra income helps our family, and he asked that I not take any students past midnight. His reasoning was that if the baby had trouble sleeping, he could handle it and hopefully get him back to sleep. Everything was working fine until recently. My husband got back on a schedule where he wants to go to bed at 11 p.m. every single night. We try to stick to it, but with a baby, sometimes it just doesn't happen. Sometimes our son stays asleep when I put him to bed after nursing, and sometimes he wakes up screaming. Last night, I told my husband I had my student at 11 p.m. and that I would try to have the baby sleeping by then. That's when things got weird. He asked me what my plan was if the baby woke up, reminding me that his bedtime was 11 p.m. and that I should hopefully have thought of something. I told him that hopefully our son would stay asleep, but if not, he would just have to take care of him or put him on his playmat to entertain him. My husband said that bedtime was 11 p.m. and that he would go to bed no matter what. This is his own child we're talking about, not some neighbor's kid we're babysitting. When 11 p.m. came around, the baby was in bed and my husband was just getting out of the shower. I started my lesson, but apparently our son woke up moments later. When I finished my 30-minute session and came out of my office, I found my husband walking around with the baby. I took our son, nursed him back to sleep, and we all went to bed shortly after 11:30. This morning, my husband was acting cold toward me. When I tried to give him our usual goodbye hug before he left for work, he didn't hug me back. We always do this ritual before he leaves, so I knew something was up. I asked him if he was still upset with me. He said yes, that I had crossed his boundary because his bedtime was 11 p.m., and we had discussed this. He told me he goes to bed at that time and anything past that is my problem to solve if the baby wakes up. Then he just left for work, leaving me standing there in complete shock. I've been thinking about this all morning and I'm honestly baffled. We're talking about a 30-minute window twice a week where I'm working to help support our family financially. This isn't some hobby or leisure activity, and more importantly, this is his own child. The whole reason I only scheduled one evening student was because we agreed that my work shouldn't interfere with family time, but apparently, his sleep schedule is more important than being a parent when our baby needs him. What really gets me is that he acts like taking care of his own son for 30 minutes is some huge favor he's doing for me. Like I'm asking him to babysit someone else's kid instead of being a father to his own child. I understand that his autism and attention deficit hyperactivity disorder can make certain routines really important to him. I've always tried to be understanding about his needs and accommodate them where possible. But this feels like he's using his conditions as an excuse to avoid parenting responsibilities. The worst part is how he framed it as me crossing his boundaries. Since when is asking your partner to parent their own child for half an hour considered crossing boundaries? If anyone's boundaries are being crossed, it's mine. I'm working to help support our family while also being the primary caregiver to our son, and he can't handle 30 minutes of baby duty twice a week. I'm starting to realize that this isn't really about bedtime at all. It's about him feeling entitled to complete freedom from parenting duties after a certain time, regardless of circumstances. He wants all the benefits of being a father without any of the inconveniences. When I called my sister to vent about this, she pointed out something that really hit home. She said that parents don't get to have rigid boundaries when it comes to their children's needs. Kids don't operate on schedules, and sometimes being a parent means your plans get disrupted. I'm planning to have a serious conversation with him when he gets home. I need to make it clear that being a parent doesn't end at 11 p.m. Our son didn't choose to be born, and he certainly didn't choose to have a father who thinks parenting has business hours. If he wants to maintain this ridiculous boundary, then maybe he shouldn't have agreed to take parental leave in the first place. Maybe I should have taken the full year off instead of going back to work early to help our family financially. The more I think about it, the more I realize that this isn't just about one evening. This is about him fundamentally misunderstanding what it means to be a partner and a parent. And if he can't handle 30 minutes of baby care twice a week, how is he going to handle the bigger challenges that come with raising a child? I just hope that when we talk tonight, he can see how unreasonable he's being. Because right now I feel like I'm married to someone who thinks being a father is a part-time job with very convenient hours. And now we have reached the end of today's stories. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.